Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the City of Lake Forest Park City Council regular meeting for Thursday, August 8th, 2024 to order. And with that, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I'd entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. I think your video feed is going around the world and back to us. A little delay.
Yeah.
The ayes, are there any nays? The ayes have it. The agenda is adopted as written. With that, we're moving on to public comments. And as our requirement here, read the public comments statement here in the rules the council has set. The council will not be accepting online public comments. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council on agenda items or any other topic the council might have purview or control over. However, the mayor or council may not respond to comments from the public. If the comments are of nature that the council does not have influence or control over, then the mayor may request the speaker suspend their comments. The mayor or council may direct staff to follow up on items brought up by the public. Comments are limited to 3-minute time limit. Okay, and with that, we will open public comments. Would you check for me, Chief, please?
Oh, no, that's after this.
After that. Yep. This is just general public comments. And then for those of you who have signed up here to speak pro or against Initiative 2117, make sure I get the number correctly here. We will reserve your comments to that time if that is acceptable. You're welcome to speak both times, but preference would be that you speak during the public hearing. Mr. Kiefer, do you want to speak on any other topic other than Initiative 2117?
No, just 2117. That's what I came to talk.
Okay, we'll have time for that. Jack Tonkin. Welcome, Jack.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Good evening. I have some good news and some bad news, I guess. The good news was reading the new schematic for the park maintenance programs, in that I find it a miracle to have stuffed so much into a small area at I don't know whose bequest, but this is the first I've seen this kind of a document. And it is very colorful, very pictorial, and it's very entertaining, and it's informative. But the real backside of that is the maintenance, which is the bad news. Now, the maintenance of this $5 million park, which we can argue about whether that was worthwhile. And we can argue about the consequences downstream of what that's going to mean for maintenance long term, when we have no parking solutions, et cetera. And I was quite surprised to see the breakouts of all the things that are going to be done in this magnificent project. The thing that really is the horrible news is that it's budgeted for between $13,512,000 and $14,685,000. Those numbers are well above half of your total budget. So I don't know where the money's coming from, and it really doesn't matter. Money is money. And you should not approve a project that has exorbitant costs. You wouldn't spend that money on a car if you didn't have that money, and this is more than a car. So I would urge you to take a look at this document. And I think this is pretty, but don't fall in love with this because it's not practical at all. And you've paid a consultant a lot of money to do that. Look at this document and tell me if you think all the things that are in here should be done. We'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate your comments. With that, we're moving on to David Haddock. David, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm here to talk about reasonable use exemptions and specifically about a proposal that has been put forth by the proponents for the Gary property. And if you're not that familiar with the site, it is a piece of property along Lions Creek. It sits in the floodplain of the creek. And the creek goes up against part of the property that is a very steep slope. It's mapped as a steep slope, is a steep slope. And so reasonable use exemptions, in my thought of them, are there to allow the proponent to show us why their parcel should be allowed, why their project should be allowed, and how, if it's allowed, it won't impact environmental concerns. And the biggest ones that I worry about, I'm a geologist, hydrogeologist, engineering geologist, spent 40 years doing consulting, dealing with natural hazards and man-made hazards. But when you have a situation like this, you have a river eroding against a steep slope, that is a recipe for disaster. Essentially, that's what happened at Oso, creating the worst landslide in this country in terms of lives taken. This is a very small scale, if you will, of the Oso site. If that parcel is allowed to be built, it could increase the stage of floods that might happen through Lions Creek. It would do that by reducing the cross-sectional area that the water has to flow through. So when you reduce that cross-sectional area, you increase the velocity of the water and you increase the head or the height that the water goes, the height of the floodwater. Both of those things will cause increased erosion along the side of Lions Creek that abuts that steep slope. So that can cause the slope in itself to fail. Now, is that slope currently dangerous? We don't know. Why don't we know? They did a geotechnical evaluation of the parcel, but they looked only underneath the building envelope to determine what the soil conditions were. That is not along that steep slope. So if you're going to do a proper examination of that parcel, you need to look at that steep slope and look at the soil properties, run those properties through your computer program to tell you what the factor of safety is for that slope. They didn't do that. So what we really don't know how big a problem this site is, but I don't believe the proponents showed us why they should be allowed to build there. It's not a good site. It could cause problems for whoever buys that parcel itself through increased flooding, or God help us all, the slope comes down and wipes out their house. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's happened elsewhere. So that's not a good idea. And I don't think that that's what reasonable use exemptions are intended for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. And then we have Jolene Chang. Welcome, Jolene.
Well, thank you. So I would be that Oso victim. So I don't want to be that person who's sliding down. So I am calling for a moratorium on RUEs. So why? Because when the word gets out that LFP is not holding up their city code. How many developers are going to come to our town and like snap up all these empty parcels, right? Because that's already happening and abusing the system, killing the trees and the salmon because LFP allows them to do so. So Mark Hoffman has issued the MDNS, which is based on false information provided by the applicant. By law, the application is supposed to be voided. Fish and Wildlife has confirmed that the builder's answers are incorrect. And I would think that the city allowing a dozen potential code violations to go unquestioned could make it liable and vulnerable to the scrutiny of regulatory bodies. So Mayor French and Phil, wherever you are, administrator and council, you have the power to protect your city. I know you love the city. That's why you're here. So use your powers. Implementing this moratorium will give you some time to think and evaluate, well, why is this breaking down? Where and diagnose the problem? Why is this happening? And the Planning Commission did recognize that this was a problem and they tried to fix it because of this particular Gary Root project, but it's still not fixed. The implementation of the RUE permitting process is a problem. So one person holds all the keys, and that is Mr. Hoffman. And now it is your turn here to invoke your powers. So there's checks and balances for a reason. And the current staff does not have the bandwidth or the expertise to implement the proper protocols required by city code. So take a pause and evaluate and figure out how to create a process that can work with the limited resources that you have. If we look at the planning department, who was there? Right? Everybody is new. So nobody has history with this RUE, with Gary's RUE. So there's no senior engineer and the assistant planner is no longer there. Mr. Hoffman is also new, right? And he's from California, doesn't know that the magic of Lake Forest Park, and he's learning. But also Mr. Hoffman has to manage a lot. He has a big job. He's doing a couple of jobs at least. So that is with the planning, the building, the code enforcement, and elements of economic development. So that's a lot for a new person to have a couple of jobs at the same time. So everybody there is new. And then Caroline, she did the records management. Well, she retired, so there's a new person. And again, these are self-identified, like, hey, I'm new here. And so that's a problem because I tried to get documents through the regular process last week, August 1st, and I still don't have documents. It was 7 days later and I got a few emails. That doesn't help me. That's not what I asked for. So on August 12th, she's going to work on getting the RUE documents to me. She's going to work on it. So when she's new, right, it's not her fault. It's just the process. But I've missed the comments has closed. This Kid City Council, I don't have the attorney letter from the fisheries group. I mean, there's all these things. Do you see how the process is broken because they're new? So invoke the moratorium, give yourself time, because there is a way to really respect both citizens who live here and our environment while honoring the RUEs and following the code. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene. Let's see. Welcome back to Nancy Jang. Hi. Rotarian friends are back. Welcome.
Okay, Nancy Jang, and regarding the RUE proposal, we know that you're all very busy working on the budget and you don't have the time to do the research into all of the proposals that come before you. So I want to highlight just a few expert testimonials that are already in the public record. Many of them are on the dedicated website to address this particular issue. And that website is called greenvoicesoflakeforestpark.com. It has a tremendous amount of information there. So I'll read just a few of the experts that have made comments. So engineer Alan Coburn says that the flood factor is forecasting virtually all streamside properties adjacent and downstream of the Gary property will be exposed to increased major to severe flooding risk from a 100-year event, even without the federally mandated changes to the upstream culvert. So a developer with this knowledge would be ethically bound to disclose this information. We also have a fish and wildlife habitat biologist named Miles Pink, excuse me. He says, if this development were to go ahead as planned, I am concerned that its location will remove any tolerance for large woody material. What would benefit the system as a whole for floodplain storage, sediment storage, habitat creation for fish would represent a flood hazard and or bank stabilization issue for whomever lived in that house. Future measures to protect the house from flood risk would come at the expense of fish resources. It would be unacceptable to maintain a process of compromising habitat while the once thriving salmon runs of Lion Creek continue to dwindle away to nothing. Already, many homes in the Lion Creek Basin have been built within the historic floodplain, and the creek has been continually degraded in order to ensure the safety of those residents. The first step in restoring the creek should be a commitment by the city of Lake Forest Park to protect the remaining untouched parcels within the riparian corridor. Further tree failures, and this is, this is comments by arborist Daniel Collins. Further tree failures will likely cause more slope instability and potentially impact driveways above the site development. The developer's arborists often offered no mitigation or recommendations for these trees. It is my professional opinion that there was inadequate analysis and information contained in the report to advance the development proposal of owner Mark Gary.
Nancy, we're
it-
considerably over time. Could you
Oh,
kindly
so
wrap up your
sorry.
comments? No, I just want to be respectful to our guests as well. So, thank you.
Oh, well, yeah. So I just would encourage you to go to greenvoicesoflakeforestpark.com and hear what some of these specialists say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And with that, Gary Jang. Nice to see you again, Gary.
I'll try to make up for her time.
Okay.
Well, okay, I've had some experience with people making applications and doing things. In my experience, it has been, the person making the application is supposed to fill it out correctly. The planner is supposed to make sure that it's filled out correctly. And it's in my experience that doesn't happen. The people that try to make it correct are the people that live in the neighborhood. So they shouldn't have to have the responsibility to make sure a person fills out an application correctly with the right information, which is what you've heard. So that's one thing. Now, she spent a lot of time, Jolene spent a lot of time on all this stuff. You can see all the information she's given you. And it's hard to understand how with all this information, you can't make that moratorium. But there is, I was in insurance for a long time, and if your tree was rotten, it fell over, no problem. Insurance company, your individual insurance companies would cover that. If the neighbor said, hey, your tree's rotten, put it in writing, then there will be a lawsuit. Okay, same situation here. You've got all this information telling you that things aren't filled out correctly and possible problems. When these problems happen, they will have all this information to sue. Okay, so, and then I guess if it's all passed and everything like that, well, let's see, here's when the city does not follow the code, and specifically 162609, notice of code commissioner's recommendation and applications, approval, criteria, and revocation. So with all this, you have all this stuff. So now, Jolene has had some, was very, very influential in having some laws passed, getting on a radio and going on Oprah and things like that. So it's possible she might want to give some more attention to the public on something like this if it goes by, and then that makes the lawsuit even better. So that's the end. Let's make up your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate your comments. Let's see. I've exhausted our list for the folks who have signed up. Are there any members of the public that would like to make comment on things outside of the public hearing we're going to be holding here in a few minutes? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay. With that, we'll close public comment. Thank you, everybody. Let's see, where are we here? We're moving on to proclamations. Councilmember Goldman will be reading us the Childhood Cancer Awareness Month proclamation. Thank you, Larry.
Yes, thank you. Whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, and whereas 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed by their 20th birthday, and whereas there are 43 children per day, or 15,780 children annually that are diagnosed with cancer, as well as approximately 40,000 children on active treatment at any given time. And whereas the average age of diagnosis is 6 years old compared to 66 years for adults diagnosis, and 80% of childhood cancer patients are diagnosed late and with metastatic disease. And whereas on average, there has been a 0.6% increase in incidence per year since the mid-1970s, resulting in an overall incidence increase of 24% over the last 40 years. And whereas 2/3 of childhood cancer patients will have chronic health conditions as a result of their treatment toxicity, with 1/4 being classified as severe to life-threatening. And whereas approximately 1/2 of childhood cancer families rate the associated financial toxicity due to out-of-pocket expenses as considerable to severe. And whereas in the last 20 years, only 4 new drugs have been approved by the FDA to specifically treat childhood cancer. And whereas researchers and healthcare professionals work diligently, dedicating their expertise to treat and cure children with cancer. And whereas too many children are affected by this deadly disease and more must be done to raise awareness and find a cure. Now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim September 2024 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Lake Forest Park, and urge all residents to join in encouraging young people fighting cancer, honoring young people who have lost their lives to childhood cancer, and expressing gratitude to the doctors and nurses who provide special care to patients and families affected by childhood cancer. In witness whereof, signed this 8th day of August 2024, Tom French, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Excuse me. Vice Chair Furtani is going to read a proclamation on National Recovery Month.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Tracy.
All right, so the proclamation for National Recovery Month. Whereas behavioral health is an essential part of one's overall health and wellness, and whereas prevention of mental health and substance use disorder works, treatment is effective and recovery is possible, and whereas recovery is a process and that people recover in our local area and around the nation, and whereas preventing and overcoming mental health and substance use disorders is essential to achieving healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally, And whereas an estimated 400,000 people in King County are affected by these conditions, and whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with mental and/or substance use disorders to implement preventative measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. And whereas we recognize 4 dimensions of recovery from mental health and substance use disorders: health, home, purpose, and community. And whereas to help more people achieve and sustain recovery, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, King County, and Lake Forest Park invite all residents to participate in National Recovery Month. And now therefore, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim September 2024 as National Recovery Month in the City of Lake Forest Park, and urge all residents to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to increase public understanding of addiction as an illness. Signed this day, 8th day of August 2024, Tom French, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, with that, we are done with proclamations. We're going to move on to a public hearing. I'm going to just describe the process here. The Council Vice Chair Furtani is going to introduce Resolution 24-1960 concerning the State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading, excuse me. And then following that, if there are any questions the council might have of Mr. Furtani, they may ask. We will then have the public hearing, and there will be public comments from our guests in the council chambers. And then there may be possible questions after that point by the council regarding some of the statements that have been made. Finally, there will be a discussion, consideration, and/or possible action on Resolution 24-1960 concerning State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit rating. Vice Chair Furtani, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so everyone, I'm going to be reading the executive summary of the resolution. The resolution itself is titled Concerning State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading. And the executive summary goes as follows. Initiative 2117 would prohibit state agencies from implementing a cap and trade or cap and tax program. Additionally, it would repeal the 2021 Washington Climate Commitment Act, CCA, a state law that created a cap and invest carbon program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050 and prepare the state for a future low carbon economy. And the recommendation is that we are going to be considering either taking a position in support or opposition to Initiative 2117.
Thank you, Mr. Furtani. Colleagues, do you have any question of Mr. Furtani? Yes, Deputy Mayor Bodie.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Furtani. I just wanted to note for the record that we also have received a number of written comments that the council has taken the opportunity to read and consider as part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bodie. And I believe we're going to make just one moment. We're going to procedurally, I believe that those have all been entered into the record previously. Matt, are we going to read the names of those?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can read them
During the hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Just
Thank
point
you.
of clarification. You bet. Yes, Councilmember Riddle, please.
And just a point of clarification, we can take a position support, opposition, or we can take no position. I just wanted to make that clear that there are 3 options.
Thank you,
Thank
Councilmember.
you. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments from our colleagues? Okay, and with that, we'll open the public hearing on Resolution 24-1960. Okay, and first we have Mr. Kiefer.
I thought Saunders was ahead of me. He was signed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going by that list. The chief has the other one. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, there we go. We have the other list. Yes, Brian, welcome. Mr. Saunders.
Good metaphor, by the way. Well, thank you, City Council and Mayor French. My name is Brian Saunders, and I'm speaking today as a private citizen of Lake Forest Park, as well as a board member of the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation. I speak to ask the City Council to resolutely reject Initiative 2117 and 2066, but I'll focus on 2117 for today. You know, when I look at the reasons why Representative Walsh proposed 2117, I gotta say, I was filled with some great nostalgia. You know, it reminds me so much of like the late 1800s, 1950s, when the whaling industry, they fought tooth and nail to slaughter every last whale. And what was their reason? Well, it'll be the common person that suffers. It'll be the lamp oils that won't be able to burn and all the houses will go dark. And all that ma and pa small businesses will go bankrupt. And those towns that were so dependent upon whaling would all be sometimes ghost towns at some point in time. Well, obviously, New England towns are doing really well, and many wealthy New England families still own their wealth to that whaling industry. So fast forward now to the 1970s and 80s and 90s, and the timber companies, they fought tooth and nail for cutting down old growth trees in public lands. What was their argument? The common logger would lose their jobs, the mill worker would be out of work, and all those timber towns would go to the wayside. And also, the common person would suffer because lumber would become so expensive, house building would be impossible. Well, unfortunately, we now know the truth of what happened. These timber companies were making their biggest profits in the 1980s, even before any environmental law or spotted owl came on the scene. Why? Because they were automating and shipping their raw timber overseas to Japan and making their biggest profit they ever made. You know, it was in 1986 though, when this whole game plan, this whole fear-mongering game plan really went on steroids. That's when the Californians passed Proposition 65. I don't know if you're aware of this proposition. It's basically a right to know act. And it forced the oil and gas companies to put notices on gas pumps, telling them that this is all the chemicals you're being exposed to, and these are all the possible effects you might have. Completely flipped the whole policies on its head, because now it put the burden on the companies to tell us what's going on rather than the consumer having to look all that stuff up. And amazing. Well, the oil and gas companies, they weren't going to get caught out again. So all the CEOs got together in their luxury hotels and they basically formulated this $100 million plan, and they stopped every single right to know act from there on out until recently. 40 years of silence. It's pretty good. Well, anybody who's paid attention to these fear mongering of, oh, gas prices are going to go up. Oh, grocery prices are going to go through the roof. Oh, and the common person and the small businesses will go out of, go bankrupt. Anybody who's paid any attention to any of the economics over the last 4 or 5 years, there are far greater economic forces at play than any cap and trade policy. Well, sorry, I lost my place. I find it, by the way, ironic that we are here talking about putting carbon taxes on carbon emissions when we're having all these incredible forest fires growing out of control right now in the Pacific Northwest. You know what's really going to cause prices on gases to go up and grocery prices to go up? Fallout from climate change disasters, hurricanes and fires and floods, things that are going to wipe out our infrastructure, things that are going to make it so we can't have any more utilities and cut out our gas lines. Well, as an environmental science college instructor over the last 27 years, I can tell you that the most effective way we get any kind of industry to change is through cap and trade policies. We've reduced lead in gasoline. We've stopped acid rain by telling coal companies they've got to scrub out their sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides that contribute to acid rain and to photochemical smog. All of these have been reduced by cap and trade policies. It is the most effective way we do it. The only failure was in Europe. And the only reason why that failed was because of lack of real commitment from the governments, and because they didn't set the cap and trade policy low enough to make it really an economic incentive. So if anything, we should beef up these cap and trade policies and make it even greater restrictions. That'll get these guys to finally move towards renewable energies, which is where we should be.
Ryan, I need you to wrap up if you
Yeah,
could.
sorry
please.
about that.
Oh, you're good.
I guess I'll just finish up by saying I'm done with killing whales. I'm done with cutting down old growth trees, and I'm done with digging for liquid waste of a 200 million year organism, and we should resoundingly reject that. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. And with that, we're up to Nigel. Mr. Kiefer. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, is the sky really falling? Oh, man, I can't hardly believe it. I support Initiative 2117, which prohibits carbon tax credit trading and repeals carbon cap and investment program measure 2024. The climate change communists in the legislature attempted a carbon tax initiative 732 in 2016 and a carbon emissions fee initiative in 1631 in 2018. The voters rejected these initiatives, understanding that they were just a tax cash cow for the greenie agendas. Well, the communists and greenie academics are a stubborn group and passed the 2021 Washington Climate Commitment Act, a state law that provides for a cap and investment program designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. None of this nonsense changes the climate, but does tax the taxpayers. The greenie academics promote climate action goals based on United Nations Agenda 21 ideology. This ideology is no more than a political theater, void of empirical data capable of being verified or disproved by observation or experiment. It is all about the money. That's what it's all about. It's not about climate. It's a ruse. But here we are in front of a body of climate change apostles. Everybody supports climate change here, I'm sure. And the apostles that facilitate Climate Action Committee and the climate agenda. It's almost humorous. Therefore, I suspect that this public hearing is just more of their political theater. And I don't think the sky is falling.
Thank you, Mr. Kiefer. Okay, with that, we're moving on to Fred Grant. Welcome, Fred.
Sorry, I just choked on some water here, so if I cough,
Take
it's
your
not
time.
COVID.
You're fine.
All right, good evening, City Council members. My name is Fred Grant, and I'm a Lake Forest Park resident. The word of the day is commitment. So let's break it down, shall we? The term commitment refers to a dedication or obligation to a particular cause, goal, relationship, or course of action. It implies a steadfast resolve to follow through on promises, responsibilities, or agreements. Commitment often involves loyalty, persistence, and a sense of duty. Whether it's a commitment to a relationship, a project, or personal growth, it signifies a strong and unwavering attachment to a chosen path. Initiative 2117 would dismantle the 2021 Climate Commitment Act, which was designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050. Repealing this legislation undermines our commitment to combat climate change. The cap and investment program established by the Act incentivized businesses to lower emissions by allowing them to trade carbon emissions allowances. Removing this program hampers progress towards a sustainable future. Proponents argue that Initiative 2117 benefits working families. However, it fails to address the long-term economic consequences. By prohibiting carbon tax credit trading, we risk stifling innovation and discouraging companies from investing in cleaner technologies. This could lead to job losses and hinder economic growth. There are claims that the cap and trade system contributes to high living costs in Washington. However, this is oversimplification, ignores the broader picture. Gas prices fluctuate due to various factors, including global oil markets. Blaming cap and trade alone is misleading. And I gotta tell you, I've been everywhere around the world, and I've been to these places where they are mining oil, and they're like billionaires. They're very wealthy. They're not gonna miss, some pressure. So we must strike a balance between environmental protection and economic prosperity. The 2021 Climate Commitment Act attempted to achieve this balance. Initiative 2017, by limiting the cap and investment program, tilts the scale away from environmental responsibility. In conclusion, Washington Initiative 2117 may seem appealing on the surface, but its implications are far-reaching. By opposing this initiative, we can uphold our commitment to combat climate change while fostering economic growth and innovation. You're staring at someone that is from the next generation, actually the one that's being, is dealing with this low housing and availability and all these extra costs. But I'm saying it's our time now, and I say let's prioritize a sustainable future for all of Washingtonians.
Thank you. Sorry if that's really dry. Appreciate your comments. And with that, we're moving on to Philippa Cassover. Welcome, former Deputy Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here today to advocate for a no vote on Initiative 2117, which if passed would prohibit all state agencies, counties, and cities from implementing any type of carbon tax credit trading and would prevent the state from achieving the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets which it set for in 2020. If 2117 were to pass, the state would lose a significant funding source for implementing programs which mitigate past environmental damage and injustice. The funds now available through the carbon tax credit trading program support clean transportation, clean energy development, salmon recovery efforts, environmental justice, and much more. I urge the Council to join the more than 350 organizations and tribes who oppose I-2117 and have endorsed the No on I-2117 campaign, including firefighters, small businesses, tribal nations, unions, doctors and public health leaders, the Washington State League of Women Voters, Washington State PTA, and a long list of environmental groups, as well as cities such as Kenmore and Burien. If passed, I-2117 would also severely damage Washington's transportation and infrastructure programs by taking away billions in funding, jeopardizing efforts to fix roads and bridges and reduce traffic congestion. Cities such as Lake Forest Park would find it much more difficult to gain state funding support for important projects in our community that aim to increase safety for all of us. I-2117 is also antithetical to everything this community has stood for in my 17-year residency here: protecting our natural ecosystem, mitigating the effects of climate change, and being responsible stewards of our city for future generations. I believe I speak for the majority of our community in asking for your support of the No on Initiative 2117 campaign. And I say that because of the election of all of you, the election of me twice, and not the election of other people who have spoken here this evening. So please join with the residents of Lake Forest Park and take a no position on I-2117. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. I have no more people signed up for speaking at the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak at the public hearing that has not? Okay, with that, Mr. McLean, would you like to read into the record the names of the people who have sent us in written comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In support of Initiative 2117, we received comments from Let's Go Washington and David Haddock. We received written comments to take no position on it from Wynn Harper, and opposed to Initiative 2117 and I apologize if I mispronounce any names, received for opposed to initiative 2117 from Janae Keiji, Temra Erickson, Andrea Hughes, Sarah Phillips, Sally Yamasaki, Sadie Yamasaki, Dan Benson, and Matthew Sun. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Appreciate that. And with that, we will close the public hearing. Colleagues, are there any questions about the comments that have been raised during the public hearing? It's just our procedure. If there's not, that's okay. All right, if hearing none, let's move on to discussion, consideration, and or possible action on resolution 24/1960 concerning State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit rating. Yes, Vice Chair Furtani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And at this point, I'd like to I guess, move resolution 24/1916 concerning State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading, and that the council take a no on 2117 position.
Thank you, Mr. Furtani. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Colleagues, any discussion on the motion at hand? Mr. Furtani, yes.
I'm speaking in favor of the motion, as you might expect. As a greenie academic, I could bore you with all kinds of wonderful charts like the Mauna Loa air studies that show that we're at the highest carbon concentrations in our atmosphere in millennia. And there's all kinds of other data to support that, but that's just arguing those facts. Let's talk about basically what I saw at the farmer's market literally on Sunday. And can you bring up, Mr. McLean, the photograph? Thanks. What I'm sharing is the Citizens Climate Lobby had sponsored a booth at the farmers market on Sunday, and they had asked people to put a push pin in on where they are concerned, where their concern on climate change lies. And in fact, you can see from the graph itself that what's startling to me is just the number of responses and the number of responses on that one side. And this is our community. This is, yes, sure, there's probably some people from Kenmore and Seattle and Shoreline coming, but nevertheless, these are probably the bulk of Lake Forest Park. The bulk of these votes are from Lake Forest Park residents. Combined with the number of comments that we've received taking the no on 2117 position that have just been read into the record. And I want to add one other one. I think that Wynn Harper had a neutral comment. Yeah. Okay, thanks. All right, so the point being that basically just judging by the number of dots, as former Deputy Mayor Cassover said, 90% of basically the Lake Forest Park is probably in favor of this. So I'm very much advocating that we represent our constituents and take the no on 2117 position.
Thank you, Vice Chair Furtani. Colleagues, any other comments or thoughts? Deputy Mayor Bodie.
I think in my time on council at Lake Forest Park and all my interactions with the community, one thing that I hear a lot is about looking ahead to the future and our legacy for the future. And part of what we do is we protect our green infrastructure. We look for those things that are environmentally sound, but also pragmatic. I believe that the community considers the current legislation to be important and pragmatic and part of our legacy for the future. I think that it's a legislation that we as a city of Lake Forest Park benefit from for some of our important funding projects that we want to do that we couldn't otherwise do without some grant assistance. So again, as a matter of legacy, I'll be supporting the resolution.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bodie. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. As we heard from our constituents today about the Gary property and how the impacts that one property and a change to that one property can have throughout our community, this particular initiative would eliminate the ability for us to continue to provide security for our community against some of these climate impacts. Now, it's not going to solve every problem. Climate change is a big, complicated scientific problem. But if we don't sort of come at it from all different angles, we will never really solve this problem. I believe that opposing this initiative is the best for our community.
Thank you, council member. Okay, let's see where we are. Any other comments? Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments that we've heard tonight. And our former Deputy Mayor Cassover was very eloquent in supporting the resolution to oppose this initiative. I think, though, that I'm very proud to be a Washingtonian for a state that would take on such a plan to have a cap and trade, to realize that there are things that we can do as citizens to address what is really some, and I agree with, an existential problem for us, not just here in Washington, but in the world. We see every day the impacts of what's occurring, floods, droughts, hurricanes. It's affecting, as one of our citizens said, Saunders, that we are all being affected in ways that we can only imagine. Our food, our infrastructure, the things that we see every day are being affected by this. I'm proud that as a Washingtonian, our state legislature took this action. And I would be very disappointed to see that our citizens would overturn this. So I'm very supportive of the resolution to oppose this initiative. We need to take the steps, think globally, act locally. As a city, as a citizen, I think that we need to take action every day to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo. Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much to the members of the community who either spoke tonight or sent us letters regarding I-2117. I will also be voting to oppose 2117 for many of the reasons that my colleagues have already said. A few months ago, we as a city council adopted the climate action plan that was developed by our climate action committee. And while a plan is an important first step, what's really important is the action, implementing that plan. And that requires resources that as a small city, we simply don't have enough of. And we've already been the beneficiary of the Climate Commitment Act. We received quite a large grant in order to establish a task force to actually start implementing the recommendations of the Climate Action Committee. And we're going to have to keep doing that in the future. So it's really important that we have the resources to effectively put our money where our mouth is and to implement the changes that will be successful in locally reducing our impact on the environment. And so for those reasons, I am very supportive of continuing the Climate Commitment Act to allow us and other cities and counties around the state to continue these critical actions to support our environment. So I will also be opposing I-2117.
Thank you, Councilmember Goldman. Any other questions or not questions, comments, I should say? Yes, Councilmember Good.
I'm a relatively new member of Lake Forest Park, but I grew up in California and I lived in Pasadena. And if you lived in Pasadena, you always had to worry about if you were going to be able to breathe at the end of the day because of all of the crud that was in the air. It finally got better when there was rules for them to start controlling all of the nasty stuff that was going in the air. We used to have to be locked in our schoolrooms because we couldn't go outside because that's how bad the air was. And this is in Pasadena when I grew up. And so I'm also in support of opposing I-2117 because I lived it and these things are important for our children because I can't imagine what it would be like to go back. We need to go forward and not back to the 1960s. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, I think we've heard from everyone. Are there any other comments? Okay, colleagues, before you is a motion to adopt resolution 24-1960, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park, Washington, in opposition of Washington State Ballot Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax credit rating. For clarity, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Deputy Mayor Bodie, how do you vote?
Process request, do we need to put aside the three-touch rule for this, or are we good? I just want to make sure that we address
Yes.
that issue.
Right.
I'm just gonna look in your governance manual. Don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Not trying to complicate things.
I believe that we considered waiving the three-touch rule for this specific purpose, but I can't remember whether it finally made it finally to the governance manual through 7 editions or 5 editions. Regardless, we could waive, you would be welcome to waive the three-touch rule if you so choose.
I'd like to make a motion in case we have to waive our three-touch rule, that we waive our three-touch rule for this important and timely purpose. And I also want to thank Vice Chair Fortani for shepherding this through and following up on this with us. It's much appreciated.
It's been moved to
Second.
waive the three-touch rule in this circumstance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about waiving the three-touch rule? No, all those in favor of waiving the three-touch rule in consideration of adopting resolution 24/1960, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. So with that, we'll move back to the roll call vote. Deputy Mayor Bodie, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the resolution. Yay.
Thank you. Vice Chair Furtani.
I vote in favor, yay.
Thank you, Mr. Furtani. Councilmember Riddle.
I vote in favor. Yay.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldman.
I vote aye.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Councilmember Good
Aye.
and Councilmember Lebo.
Aye.
Let the record show that it is 6-0 in favor of the resolution. Thank you, Council, very much for your consideration. Okay, we are moving on to Judge Grant. Welcome. You've been waiting there patiently. We have the pleasure of Judge Grant's State of the Court presentation.
Right, Matt.
I've never tried that. It looks really fun.
Just for you. Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am so,
Mike, move the mic a little bit closer. There you go.
good evening. I am so pleased to present my State of the Court for the 2023 year. I'm Judge Grant, and I'm here with my court administrator, Julie Espinoza. And we have prepared a written report for your review, which I believe was included in your packet for this week's meeting. And I just wanted to go over a few highlights and answer any questions you might have. First and foremost, I want to say it's been a pleasure and a privilege to serve as the presiding judge in Lake Forest Park. And for the last 2 years, I've been getting my feet under me, but what drives me is our mission statement, that I administer justice fairly and impartially, that I provide equal access to all individuals, and I treat everyone with respect, competence, and efficiency. And that is what I try to do, and is what every staff member in the court strives to do, as I know you do as well in your work. All right, here is an overview of the staff for the municipal court. And we are an independent branch of government. I am the presiding judge. I have a number of duties that are governed by GR 29. And I am a 0.6 full-time employee. So I want to go over a little bit of how we're staffed and the work that we do, because I often get to see you all when I'm doing the fun things and swearing people in or at different events. But there is a lot of labor that goes into maintaining our court. And I want to speak to that and the exceptional work that my court staff does. Julie is a full-time employee, and she is really the backbone of the court. It is a pleasure to have someone with her experience at my side, helping run the court on a daily basis. I'm here 2 days a week, do administrative work, but Julie is here every day, making sure things run smoothly. She oversees the clerks directly, and we have 4 clerks. That comprises 2.5 full-time positions. So we are a very, very lean court. I know I will be speaking with you soon in the next month or so about budget issues, but I just want to put this out there about where we are right now. We have 2.5 clerks. When you see 4 names up there, I want to speak a bit to our staffing that we have right now. Last year, we had a change in our court administrator, and I am so blessed to have Julie here with me. When we were short a court administrator, Kelly Gradwell stepped in and lent a hand to the court. She was started as a clerk, and then she served as court administrator for 8 years. So we were really blessed to have her come back out of retirement and help us out. And right now she is working on a per diem basis. So it's just a little bit of time here and there. And she's been critical helping train Alicia Body. She's our newest employee. So having Julie or having Kelly there to sit with Alicia and really educate her on what goes into being a court clerk. Alicia is getting her master's right now. She's very driven with criminal justice. Her undergrad degree was in that. She's getting a master's in criminal justice. So she's a newer court employee, and I hope she stays with us for a long time, but she's getting excellent training at this point. I have Lois Weischer, who's a full-time clerk, and Elizabeth is working at a 0.5 capacity. So it looks like we have a lot of clerk staff, but I'm sure Julie and I will be presenting to you the shortcomings of what we have right now. But with the staffing we do excellent work, and we put everything we have into doing it well. Charles Mitchell is a new employee from last year, 2023. Phil Stanley, our prior probation officer, retired after 19 years. So we are very sad to see Mr. Stanley go, but Charles Mitchell is a wonderful addition to the court, and he has a very gentle manner about him. He's worked in the jail settings and prison settings, but he brings such a light touch with the defendants that he's helping maintain their compliance with their court-ordered conditions. So what is it that we actually do besides going to fun events? Well, I'm going to point out just a few things, little highlights. Our clerking staff has very important work that they do with all the scheduling, managing our caseloads, and keeping everything reported and docketed. And that is our master record of what takes place in the courtroom. Although court is in session 2 days a week, we are open 5 days a week. The window is there. We have a lot of foot traffic that comes in, and we make sure that we answer their needs, whether it's answering questions about jury duty or taking a payment for a infraction that they've received, or helping them with criminal obligations from a criminal case. Jury management. Every month we gear up for trial. We don't go to trial very often, but we have to be prepared every single month. So summons go out, and we begin the process of screening and going through to make sure people are eligible, that they don't have conflicts, and that they can serve on the next jury term. In 2023, 1,800 summons were sent out for trials. We need to send out approximately 150 a month to staff a trial should it be necessary, because there are people that just will not respond or they just aren't eligible to sit on the case. So it's a huge amount of work to get ready, and they don't go often, but in 2023, we did have a jury trial and it was fascinating. Took place over 3 days. It was a DUI trial and resulted in a conviction, but we were able to figure out some of the kinks with all this wonderful technology that we have, and we got some good feedback, and I think you'll see some of the comments in the written report that we presented to you. The legal financial obligations, much of what we do has to do with money, that we are dealing with the finances of the court, taking in payments for their costs and assessments or traffic penalties, or if they're paying a photo ticket, and everything needs to be documented and done precisely. So a very large portion is dealing with financial obligations and end of month duties and end of day duties, and now annually. Lindsay will speak to that. We are dealing with getting ready for the budget session going forward. As the presiding judge, I'm responsible to oversee everything. Everything stops with me. So the policies and procedures and how we run the court and managing the staff, even though I have Julie capably handling things on the day-to-day, I need to make sure that I am prepared and able and stepping in when necessary. And the last object there is search warrants. I don't know if you are aware that I have 24/7 duty to have my phone with me, near me, should the police need to seek a warrant, day or night. And also will step in for other jurisdictions if their court, if their judge has a conflict. So we help each other out in that manner, but it's another thing that I get to do. In line with our mission, we are always looking at different ways that we can further provide access to justice. And a few of the things I wanted to point out is that we learned a lot through the pandemic, and operating a hybrid court has turned out to be very beneficial for a lot of people. Having the option to Zoom in for your hearing allows people to not have to take a full day off of work. It has reduced failures to appear, which result in bench warrants, which result in jail bookings. So having that remote option has worked out well. We offer that for most cases on the morning criminal calendar. And of course, I have criteria set for the people that I do need to see and for certain types of crimes. But the afternoon infraction calendars are all remote. And so they're all handled on Zoom. And that has saved a lot of security costs. So we have to maintain a safe courtroom when we're calling people in, and not having to open the courtroom doors for people to come in to hear their infraction saves a great deal of money for the city. Now, you might ask, isn't it kind of difficult for some people to have their hearing on Zoom? You know, we have older people or people who don't have technology on hand. And I would say that most people have cell phones. They're able to call in. And if they don't, or if they have any struggles, we invite them to come here to the courthouse, and we have a laptop that we set up in the lobby that we make available to them. And if they have trouble hitting the camera, the mute button, we have someone out there that can assist them, and it works really quite well. We've also extended the coverage we have with public defenders. We typically had one defense attorney who was contracted to come in and handle cases. That has been increased to 2, and that has been very helpful in speeding along the processing of the cases, especially if we have anyone who's in custody. We can have one attorney go down and talk to the in custody. I always say go down, but go over and speak to them. And we are now handling them remotely on video and streaming them into the courtroom. Kind of an interesting fact is that our prosecutor, the contract is with Sarah Roberts, but our day-to-day prosecutor is Carmen McDonald, and she lives out of state. So she is Zooming in. So she is always a presence on the screen when we're having criminal court. Further access to justice is helping people who are in dire straits financially. They may find that they're in a deep hole and unable to get their license because they have a lot of tickets. So the King County Universal Payment Program, the UP program, can help them get on a payment plan, get those tickets released, and get their licenses back. It is really critical, and it is something that we celebrate when someone does get their license. The need to get from place to place is so important when people are trying to get their children where they need to go do their shopping, to get to work. So every time someone comes in and they've been able to obtain their license, I congratulate them because it is such an important piece for them to go forward in their life. Legal financial assistance, LFO assistance, is the opportunity for people to come to the court and say, I'm in a bad way. I don't have the money to pay this in full. Please don't send me to collection. Give me some other options. So I will look at reducing what I can, putting them on payment plans, allowing community service at the minimum wage rate for them to work off those obligations. And having someone go to collection is the last thing we really want to happen. And I always tell them when I sentence them to financial obligations that if you can't do this, you come back to the court and you let us know, because I don't want this going to collection. I don't want that for you. So come back and talk to us. And that's something they can come to the window, or they can call the court and we will set it on for hearing, or have them write a note to the court for it to be considered. The last thing, and this is not from 2023, but I want to brag about it a little bit, is the Pocket Talk. We have a new device that was paid for through a grant, and it will translate into, I think, 82 languages. So it's a very easy tool that looks like a cell phone that we can use at the window. It's not for courtroom, court hearing procedures, but it is for helping people at the window, and it has been very helpful. So that is another tool that helps make this system more accessible. I'll speak to this very briefly, looking at jail alternatives. Oftentimes when people are here facing a criminal charge, we want to make sure that it's safe for them to be out in the public. And sometimes if they have, say, a DUI and multiple offenses, we want to set some restrictions on whether they are able to drive. The court can impose things like ignition interlock or a SCRAM device. SCRAM would be monitoring their alcohol content through a bracelet and their perspiration. So it would be 24/7 monitoring them. Putting someone on EHM, I may be concerned to have them out in the community, but I don't want them necessarily sitting in a jail cell. Being in jail is not beneficial to anyone. And it should be treated more as a last resort, and for things, for situations where it is absolutely necessary as a penalty, but it's very destabilizing for a lot of people. And if they're working, I would like them to be able to get to work and keep their jobs and support their families and continue on. Sometimes these are, small snags in the road in their lives. Sometimes it's more significant. Sometimes they need to be in jail. And I know you understand that we have very high jail costs that we're dealing with. And I'm trying to be very mindful of that and to use these alternatives. So if we have someone who's on EHM, they would be put on a bracelet and required to stay in their home. And I can set some exceptions for them to shop and go to work and go to medical appointments, go to their treatment. The cost of these alternatives, except for the remote breath, which is a handheld device that they would blow into to give a sample. It's a point in time reading. That's $7 a day. The other options are $16 a day through Moon Security. EHM and SCRAM working together, where they're required to be home and monitored for alcohol use, is $22 a day. The GPS is a device that would say where they are, and it would monitor them every 30 seconds. So if you have a domestic violence case and you want to make sure that they're staying a distance from someone, you can have that GPS monitoring. You can know where they are immediately. They can even send an alert to the victim of the crime so that there can be intervention. So it's a wonderful tool. All of those things are far less expensive than jail. Jail is important and necessary at times, but when we can work around that and do these alternatives, I try to implement that. We did include some numbers in the report. If we, in 2023, we had people on monitoring for 865 days. If that would have been in a jail bed at Snohomish County, that would have been $167,000. By using alternatives, it's $12,700. So trying to be mindful of cost and community safety. Now for a happy story. This is to please Lindsay as well, because she always likes the good time stories. Youth Court, very proud of Youth Court. It is in coordination with Shorecrest High School. They come in, they volunteer to hear cases of 16 and 17-year-old drivers who have been cited for a traffic infraction. These students volunteer, the participants who have been cited agree to come into youth court and have their case adjudicated by their peers. We have had the chief has come in and watched them and been very impressed. Bo Jordan has been a police officer. He's worked at the high school. He's been president of the state organization. He still oversees this program. So when we have cases, we send a call out to him. He rallies his troops of students. He prepares them, trains them, and they come in and they hear the case. And it's here in the courtroom. And it is just wonderful. I am always here for the hearings, and I sit and I meet with the parents and I meet with the students. And I don't know what the panel is going to do. It's their decision to make. But it is amazing to watch this interaction going on between the person who committed the offense. They're taking responsibility. They're coming in knowing that they are admitting that the infraction occurred, but they have the ability to have that dismissed if they comply with the sanctions imposed by the youth court. And those options can be defensive driving class. Most often it's community service hours that are imposed, and in some instances, letters of apology. I find it fascinating to hear the students' questions to the offender, what they choose to ask, and then the sanctions they impose, because it doesn't always align with what I might be thinking, but this is their peers and this is how they're thinking. So it's wonderful. And I highly encourage you, if you would like, I can let you know when we have a session and you can come observe because it's fantastic. So it does hold them accountable. Most often we've had success. I think we've had one person who has failed to comply with the sanction that was imposed. But I want to tell you about one case that they had, and I'm just pointing this out. I know road safety has been really important to the council and the photo enforcement that we've been doing. So there was one instance in 2023 where two young men, one was 16, one was 17. They were speeding very fast down 522. One was in a SUV, one was on a motorcycle, and they were weaving through traffic and going well above 20 miles per hour. They were pulled over by our officer, Benjamin, and they were cited for speeding. Often with the officers, they will do like on the roadside intervention, face-to-face with them. They were not cited with racing, they were cited with speeding 20 miles per hour over. One had opted into youth court and the other we hadn't heard from. We actually reached out to the mother and, it was like, you have this option. She was an attorney. Do you want, and she's like, I didn't know. So even though we are always trying to get that information out there, she said, of course, I want my child to take advantage of this. And so we had both boys. They are boys. They were 16 and 17 years old. They opted into youth court and they came in, and the case was heard, and the youth court jury decided that they would each have to perform 10 hours of community service, and they would have to write a letter of apology. And I wanted to share just a few excerpts from the defendants. One said, "This experience has been a wake-up call for me. I have realized that driving is not merely a privilege, but also a responsibility. I must be accountable for my actions on the road and must strive to be cautious and conscientious driver. Going forward, I commit to adhering to all traffic laws and speed limits, ensuring that I prioritize the safety of myself and others at all times." That young man did his community service at a church, and he provided meal service and did 10 hours, which I thought was wonderful. The other person did his community service hours at a park where he read meters and built play structures. And his letter was very interesting. He said he was writing with deep remorse, knowing how reckless his actions and that they'd endangered the safety of others on the road. And he was sorry for his irresponsible act of speeding. And he also pointed out that it was impacting those on the road, pedestrians, the law enforcement that were required to intervene, and also his family, that things could have gone very wrong. And I wanted to point this out to you because I know you're very concerned about pedestrian safety and fast driving on our roadways. And I thought you might appreciate that this was an intervention and this was a different way of approaching it with these young people. I hope they internalized it from their letters. It sounds like they did, and I think that they will grow and move on from that experience. If you have heard of State v. Blake, that was a Washington State Supreme Court case in 2021 that ruled the drug possession statute was unconstitutional. It was for unwitting possession, and they threw out all the convictions going back to 1979. And so they decided, excuse me, that they were going to invalidate all those convictions. And there was a lot of work to be done because those convictions could count on someone's offender score. And so they mandated that all the courts step in, go through your records, find anyone who might have fallen within this being charged and convicted under the statute or one of its predecessor statutes. And so they needed us to do that. The state was going to fund it, but they wanted all the courts to take care of that work. And it was a lot of work because we didn't know what we were doing. We were running reports, trying to find things from, decades ago, but we did it. We had cases that we were vacating through cooperation with the defense and the prosecution. And then those cases where they had money coming back to them, we had to get procedures in place to bring them into court, figure out who they were, make sure that they had good addresses, IDs, and refund the money they had paid to the court. And then the state paid us back for every bit of time that we put into it, finance, the defense, the prosecutors, the court. We got all of that back. So we did all the labor. We got a lot of credit for doing the work and being ahead of the curve. And it did not cost the city anything. And so going forward, we still need to be mindful of this, and they are looking at even going further and refunding additional monies that these defendants may have paid. There's been some movement of repaying them if they hired an attorney, that they could recover the cost of that attorney. So there seems to be no end in sight as to the amount of work that might come our way, but we are up to the task. And I think that I've spoken for a long time, but I want to I put in the filings. As you'll see, it's a 5-year range of filings, and it's really difficult because we have a pandemic. So everything on the left on all of these different grids is very skewed by having a mandated stay-at-home order and just how that played out. I think the most significant aspect of the filings that you've been aware of is in 2021, after the schools went back in session and they were doing cohorts, those cameras were on all day. And so we saw that huge surge in photo tickets in 2021, and it passed 30,000. And that was like a crazy number, like all hands on deck. We have to deal with that. But I'd have you take a look and see that in 2022 and 2023, the number still is very high and it is still going up. And we are looking at having more cameras coming aboard. And so just being mindful of where we are right now and the amount of work that goes into each and every one of those tickets. So it's not automated. Even if someone gets a photo ticket and they wish to pay it, there's 4 touches that will take place with our clerks to accept a payment, to docket the payment, to then note that it's received and then take action closing. So there's always multiple touches. People have the option to mitigate or ask to contest it, and that's when it would be brought to me. And it can come to me in a number of different ways. They can handwrite their mitigation or ask to contest. They can email it in what we call a tech hearing, and they can actually ask for a in-person hearing on Zoom and have a hearing with me in the afternoon. So each and every one of those tickets does amount to a significant amount of work. And so I just want to be mindful that with the system we have now and the numbers that are increasing, that we'll need to keep an eye on that we can be responsive in a timely way and fulfill the work that you are deciding will be coming through the court. Going forward, these are things I just want to put on for your consideration, is that we're always looking to improve access to justice. The Blake issues, as I stated, will be ongoing as the legislature and they decide how they want us to respond to costs and penalties that were imposed. We have a shortage of public defenders. That's a huge problem right now, and the Supreme Court is looking at setting caseload limits. And if they do that, it's going to be very catastrophic. So I don't know how that will happen. I know a lot of courts are very concerned. We can barely manage now having one person who's doing our conflict counsel. We used to have 3, we have 1 right now. Phil put out a bid to try to get someone to fill the role to replace, and there was no one put their name in to take on that job. So that it's a concern. The court security remains a concern, making sure. I think we've done as much as we can do to be safe here in the courtroom. We have a lot of measures that were put in, and I'm very appreciative of that. But it's something that we always need to be mindful of. And as a court staff, we are trained and know what to do in an emergency, and actually feel very safe having our police department right here in the building. And I know that they have my back in a moment if I push that button. There's an ongoing shortage of interpreters. The pandemic has made it to where most interpreters are unwilling to come to court. They will appear on Zoom, but they are unwilling to come into the courtroom. And that's been and it's almost as if there's no amount of money, from what I've heard from other courts, for them to appear. They can maybe take on multiple assignments in that same window of time, but these are ongoing issues that are impacting the court system. And lastly, the case management system. This has been many, many years. The CLJ, CMS system, I think we are still several years out before they implement it in our court. But there are other things that I would like to do in the interim to manage our system and to become digital files and move in that direction. So we can talk more about that later. And I just want to say thank you. Again, it is such a privilege to serve as your judge. And if you have any questions, always reach out to us or come visit. And anytime, we'd be happy to have you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, and Julie as well.
Thank you, Judge Grant and Julie, both of you, for an excellent presentation. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Judge Grant or Ms. Espinoza? Yes, Councilor Goldman.
Yeah, thank you, Judge Grant, for coming in. I appreciate that you're taking a very community-centered approach. I have a lighthearted question and then a more serious question. So lighthearted, is it strange for you to be standing on that side of the courtroom?
No, because I'm a part-time judge, so I'm still a part-time practicing attorney. So this is not completely unfamiliar, but I love seeing you from this vantage point.
And then the more serious question, is there a particular challenge or opportunity that you would particularly like the court system, that the Lake Forest Park Court to address in the next year or so?
Staffing, I think, is critical just to keep up with what we need to do, to make things continue to run smoothly. That's really important. And I think the other big item is going digital, doing O-Court or Laserfiche or something to move where paper, we have paper files. I like paper, but at some point we need to progress.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Chair Furutani.
Thank you. And Judge Grant, thank you very much. As Councilmember Goldman pointed out, the community-centered approach to justice. And I do appreciate you basically working with all the traffic infractions and being very human about it and talking to each individual case about what's going on and the possibilities. To that workload, we may be potentially adding another 10,000 infractions per year. And I'm wondering, this may be the discussion that we're having in September, but what do you see as the effect on essentially the court staff?
I'll let Julie speak to that a bit. A lot of the work is done before it gets to me. They get it all ready for me. And then when I do things and go in there and muck it up, then they have to go document it all. So I'll let Julie speak to that.
As far as workload, potentially we would need at least one more staff person because the number of tickets that come in, depending on what action needs to be taken, could be up to, Judge Grant said 4 steps. Some of them are up to like 15 or 20 steps, depending on her rulings, if they need a hearing, what needs to be docketed, if it needs to be researched, if it needs to be pulled from collections. And the photo enforcement tickets are the majority of the work. Of course, we have the criminal filings and the court clerks that do the cleanup after court. That's a whole different kind of process for clerks to do. Our clerks can do, except for Alicia, because she can do all of the rules. And that's the goal, so that if someone's out, someone else can step in. With only 2.5 clerks right now, and they are all on staggered schedules. So we only have 1 clerk full-time, 5 days a week. Then work gets really kind of passed around a lot. So you have to be able to pick up someone else's work, know what you're doing, and also be able to explain processes to the judge or to the public.
And I would say 10,000 more tickets if we're at 22 or 23,000. That's significant.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other questions for our friends from the court? Deputy Mayor Bodie.
Thank you very much to the both of you, and thank you for the excellent report. I have just a nagging concern about the Supreme Court setting caseload limits and what that will mean for public defense. At some of the meetings I've attended with other cities, some of the possible proposals would mean would basically leave you with the how do you find those attorneys and how do you find qualified attorneys? So do you have any more commentary on that? Because it seems pretty concerning if they really go in the direction they seem to be leaning in.
It's incredibly concerning. I belong to a group of municipal judges that meet on Friday. We call it the MJBR. It's a municipal judges breakout room. And these are things that we struggle with, talking about how we're going to do it. Should we have a united front where we go out there and put our position? In reality, with the misdemeanor caseload, we're in a little different position. I think they're really worried about those attorneys that have massive felony caseloads and being qualified, but it trickles down, right? There's just fewer and fewer people that are wanting to do the work and fewer people that want to go into an office. So I think it's a very difficult issue, and I'm very afraid, but it's open to comment right now. So they haven't implemented anything, and I'm hopeful that they will come to their senses and understand what the fallout will be. It's going to be pretty devastating.
I've wondered if at some point that would mean you just basically have to drop cases, basically, for lack of representation.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on it.
Colleagues, any other questions for Judge Grant or Espinosa? Well, thank you so much for all you do for our community, and we really appreciate the excellent presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Colleagues, with that, we're moving on to the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Ayes have it. Thank you, colleagues. We're moving on to, just a reminder, item A under 9 we completed that earlier this week. Item B. See, folks, I'm actually tracking this tonight because I ate. So we're on to resolution 26, 1961, accepting an addendum to the equity analysis and an updated speed and safety analysis for 178th Street, Northeast 178th Street from 25th Avenue Northeast to State Route 104, identifying a school walk zone for Brookside Elementary and authorizing use of traffic safety cameras for the zone. Ms. Pratt, thank you.
Thank you. So council, the definition of school walk zone has been broadened by the state legislature, and council for the first time can set where a school walk zone is by the definition given 1 mile radius of a school that students use to travel by foot, bike, or other active transportation. And traffic safety cameras may be used to enforce school walk zone speed limits. The resolution before you would accept the updated equity analysis, which is dated August 1st, and the speed and safety study, which is dated August 2nd. It would also identify a school walk zone for Brookside Elementary on Northeast 178th Street from 25th Avenue Northeast to SR 104. And it would approve the use of traffic safety cameras to enforce the school walk zone speed limit of 25 miles an hour. And these cameras would replace the current race zone cameras that are in that location. So that's resolution 24/1961. If you have any, this is your second touch. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Colleagues, questions for Ms. Pratt? I would just add, as the sponsor of the original legislation from going way back, traffic cameras, that this is not this does not preclude additional school walk zones being declared. Excuse me, losing my voice. This is just for purposes of this particular program, if you will. There are other opportunities to increase safety, both at Brookside and at Lake Forest Park Elementary. Pardon me. Mr. Lebo.
Thank you for your presentation. And this is really about me understanding what we're doing.
Okay.
So when I look at it, the walk zone is for Brookside Elementary is Northeast 178th Street from 25th Avenue Northeast to State Route 104. And so I'm sort of asking, well, we already, if I understand, have 3 school zone cameras, 2 on 178th and 1 on 37th, but we're not designating 37th as a walk zone for purposes of this item this evening. Is there a reason for that? And it also goes to understanding, we're authorizing, if I understand correctly, one addition, or we're changing one of the cameras. Is that right? Both cameras on 178th. So my question is, why did we not include 37th, which has a camera which is adjacent to Brookside Elementary School?
We were only looking at replacing the race zone cameras with these speed zone cameras. And so that's where this walk zone would identify. So if we have missed something.
Was there a particular reason why we didn't include 37th? as
don't
part of
know
the
of one.
definition for a school walk zone or changing the camera?
I don't know one.
I can speak to that, Councilmember Lebo. So part of this is programmatic. The program initially was for 178th Street. The equity study and the analysis was done for that, and the speed study was done for that corridor, not for 37th Avenue as of yet. That in a future study, future analyses, we will be able to consider any and all opportunities to increase safety on the other areas of other cameras or potential installations.
So the equity study did a half-mile
Yeah.
radius.
Right. But we only focused on 178th, not including 37th. Just because.
Because actually it's because it was the studies were completed. This was just a minor change to the studies. There would have to be additional analyses to the speed analysis from Transpo Group. They would have to do a separate study on 37 to add this as an additional camera system, for example, or declare it as a school walk zone specifically. Yes, Deputy Robotti.
From my perspective, I was focused on 178th because of the peril caused by 178th being a cut-through street, especially as we see the light rail open up. So the importance of focusing on 178th made sense as the school, as either a race zone or a school walkway zone, because I do think we want to make sure that the traffic that could be increasing going to and from the light rail is sufficiently slow. So that was at least my perspective on 178th, not meaning ever to exclude 37th in the future if that was a decision.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I apologize, Councilmember Earl. You were waiting patiently. Please.
No, that's okay. I think we want to look at this more holistically. Councilmember Lebo, I think you bring up a great point that the one road is not all the walk zones. So looking at LFP, looking at other Brookside walking areas, looking at Briarcrest walking areas that are within our city. And I think really looking at it more holistically is where we may want to end up, because we want to address the concerns that we have around our students walking to these schools and the high speeds that people tend to drive even on these smaller residential roads. But we do have to have the two studies to show that we can do that. And so that would be something that I would encourage the council to look into and to add as we move forward through budget season, to make sure that we can get those other studies done so that we can ensure that any student in our community that is walking to their school has the same safety protections as we're providing right now in 178.
Thank you, Councilmember Golden.
Yeah, I would also echo, I think having a two-step approach that, I mean, these cameras, since they already exist for the racing zone, it's a relatively low lift to convert them to a school walk zone. But in the future, yes, I think we should take a more holistic approach around Brookside and LFP, but also the Briarcrest, Shorecrest, Kellogg region, because the 1 mile radius of those schools does extend into portions of Lake Forest Park. So moving forward, I would very much like a more holistic, let's look at all the roads within a 1 mile radius. Where are we seeing speeding? Where can we try to address that?
Thank you, Councilmember. Very thoughtful comments. Colleagues, other comments, questions? Okay. Just as a reminder, school starts 2 weeks from last Tuesday. As of now, the cameras are issuing warnings, or ostensibly, and we're going to also experience additional traffic that's going to be coming downhill. Thank you, Ms. Pratt. Up and downhill because the light rail station's coming on in 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, I believe it is. So my fervent hope is that we're going to consider suspending our rules and having this move forward. The county is prepared to change the signs out post haste. Councilmember Furtoni.
I'd like to move that we suspend the three-touch rule for resolution 24/1961.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to suspend the rules for adoption of resolution 24/1961. Are there any further comments? Mr. Furtoni.
Yes, and of course, I'm speaking in favor of this motion, just to give a justification for suspending the rules. As Mayor French has pointed out, there is some what's the word, expediency necessary here. As you say, school starts in 2 weeks, and for my money, having the cameras online sooner than later is better, especially since the light rail is coming online, as I think Councilmember Bodie pointed out, in a couple of weeks after that. So yeah, our general policy is not to waive the three-touch rule, but this one, there is some urgency.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments on waiving the three-touch rule? Hearing none, all those in favor of, I'm sorry, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I just want to add to Councilmember Furtoni that this expediency gets us into those warning periods where we're sending out the warning tickets. So I feel comfortable moving forward on this as it's going to be providing warnings to our community and those who drive through our community.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments? All those in favor of suspending three-touch rule on resolution 24/1961, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, council. I'd entertain a motion for adoption of resolution 24/1961.
I move, oh, go ahead,
Go ahead,
please,
Councilmember
Councilmember.
I can't see all of you. I'm sorry. I move resolution 24/1961, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park, Washington, approving school walk zone traffic safety cameras pursuant to LFPMC 10.06.010.
Thank you, Councilmember. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 24/1961. Are there any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, all those, I'm sorry, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a bit on some comments I made when we first introduced this on Monday. I believe in sort of goal-oriented design. So what problem are we trying to solve? What's the best way to solve that? And ultimately, the problem we're looking to address is pedestrian safety, especially for children, but really for the community as a whole. And what tools has the state legislature given us to solve the problem? I still think it's a bit of a weird shaped tool that the legislature has given us, but ultimately the school walk zone is the best tool for the job to address pedestrian safety. And so for that reason, I'll be supporting this measure, even if I have some quibbles with what Olympia is doing.
Well said, Councilmember. Councilmember Riddle.
I echo Councilmember Goldman's comments. There might be more elegant ways of doing this, but this is what is allowed in the RCWs, and this is the best tool for this situation. So I believe we should move forward with it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting resolution 24/1961, accepting an addendum to the equity analysis and an updated speed and safety analysis for Northeast 178th Street from 25th Avenue Northeast to State Route 104, identifying a school walk zone for Brookside Elementary and authorizing use of traffic safety cameras for the zone, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, council. And again, this is one small step moving forward. And again, as I have indicated previously, if one measure of success is that people are slowing down, they've gone down from an average speed of over 30 miles an hour to 24.3, and it's holding steady after 60 days. So we're getting there. And there's many other places we have to consider additional measures to ensure the safety of everyone, particularly the children. Thank you so much, colleagues. And with that, we are there any items of other business? Mr. Furtoni, I remember you said you had something.
I'd like to move to excuse Councilmember Saunders' absence.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to excuse Councilmember Saunders' absence. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays?
Nay.
Great. Let the record
I'll
show.
be an aye.
You're an aye. The traditional dissenter is noted. Thank you, colleagues. With that, we're moving on to council committee reports, not council member reports. Yes,
Can I
please.
do another point of business? I am speaking to the reasonable use exception issue. And I just want to say that I was involved with the Planning Commission all the way through their consideration of that. And some of the case studies that were done that showed both two large structures, lack of long-term commitment to the mitigation that was proposed, and kind of a limited ability of our team because of staffing to enforce. And so I simply, in my individual capacity, urge our permit group to and our community development director to take a very thorough and serious approach to this, taking into account some of the detailed technical comments we have heard tonight. Things are concerning, but there's a much larger policy issue here, which is how the reasonable use exception process works. And we did try to tighten it up, but I do think that it warrants careful scrutiny at the permit level as well.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Riddle.
In continuation of that topic, I think we did have some policies in front of us about a year ago. So I think that if we can find a way to revisit that, I think we have a good start on being able to make some changes. Obviously within the umbrella of the RCWs allows us to do.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other items of other business? With that, we're moving on to council committee reports, and we'll move on to council member reports. Council committee reports. Mr. Lebo, do you have any comments about next week's meeting or past meetings? I guess we've already covered that. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to council member reports. We'd like to dive into the pool head first. No one. Wow. Okay. They're not a chatty bunch. With that, we'll move on to the mayor's report. I just have a couple of things. I want to give a huge shout out to the chief and his team for putting on an amazing national night out. It was really fun. I mean, seriously. They really did a fantastic job. Vice Chair Furtani, Chief Harden, myself made it to a couple three. Chief and I made it to three. Councilmember Furtani made it to a couple. Had some great conversations with people. It was really fun to see everybody out, and absolutely a perfect night temperature wise. So I think Mike ate 15 hamburgers and I had 6 hot dogs. I stopped counting at 6. So actually the food all looked really, really great. And I would say, how cool was it, Chief, to have such collegial conversations with the community? Really fun. It was really fun, and Chief did a fantastic job of talking about what the department's been doing and various programs. And so community asked some very intelligent questions, I think, and it was a really fun evening. We could have been at it all night if our voices weren't giving out. We sweat a couple 3 hours, Chief. So a couple other things on a feel-good note. The deer and bobcats seem to be all over the place right now, so watch out for the wildlife if you're driving. Yeah, there was a couple 3 deer down on the Berkman Trail last week, and they seem to be not bothered by the cyclists. So it was pretty amazing. And I think you mentioned there have been sightings of bobcats in multiple locations, different ones too. So there's more than one, which is pretty extraordinary.
I do think it's related to a lot of the construction, because the habitat areas are being more truncated and we're that green triangle, you know, so and they're spreading out of the safe ravine areas, which is a little disturbing. So
yeah. And with that, we have Administrator Hill's City Administrator report in your packet. And Councilmember Riddle, you had
I just wanted to lift up a comment under the police report where some mailboxes got damaged. I want to remind the community that we do have a locking mailbox program. You can contact the city for more information about that, but it does get you a locking mailbox at a wholesale price rather than the retail price. So just sending that out there for those that were unfortunate enough to have their mailboxes damaged.
Thank you very much for that, Councilmember. I'm sure there's other things that we haven't had a chance to talk about, but in the issue of the late hour, unless there's anything else for the good of the order. Going once. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye, Samara.